going on, everybody, and welcome in to the North End Podcast, episode 9, our Danny Houston episode, which is fairly topical for who we have here with us today. But before we get to our esteemed guest, my name is Zach Graham, your host here on the North End Podcast, joined, as always, by my good buddy, on record as my best friend, and back from the 6-day bachelor party extravaganza on the East Coast. It's Ian Michaud, aka Le James. E, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Feels good to be back in the 512. The bachelor extravaganza, I don't know if it was 6 days or 35 consecutive nights I was gone, but it felt that long. But excited to talk some soccer, maybe some other things on the schedule, the menu today.
Yeah.
And I'll let you get into to our guest here. Excited to talk to him as well.
Yeah, so been wanting to get our guest on for a few weeks here, and I'm happy he's here. I'm excited. So I'll wait no longer. The host of the Betting Pros podcast, also host for Unabated Sports, and most importantly to me, my former colleague at the FTN network. It's Thomas Viola. Thomas, how you doing, bud?
I'm doing great. Certainly a lot better than the earthquakes my team have been doing, but I'm just happy to be back here with you, Zach. It's good to finally reunite with the great Kawaisenberg for a show.
Yeah, man. So Thomas was a producer for, like I said, the FTN network. He would produce my NBA daily fantasy streams alongside the great Fast Eddie Fierce. So to most of the listeners, I think, of this podcast, that means absolutely nothing. They don't have context for that. But if you're in the daily fantasy sports space or sports betting, maybe that could ring a bell. So if you want to, I'll do this off the top, Thomas. If you want to follow Thomas's work, it's on Twitter at TV at Work. And again, host of the Betting Pros podcast, also at Unabated Sports. But Thomas is here today because, he's not producer is not really an apt description of what you do. You're a man of many talents. I know you've done esports broadcasting. Obviously, you do sports betting content and MLS content. I know you have done MLS podcasts in the past. I'm not sure actually if you and your buddy are still doing that MLS betting podcast, but I know when I was catching those episodes, they were really informative. So I guess before we dive into it, tell the people a little bit more about what you have going on.
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head with pretty much everything there. The only thing that's not on my Twitter bio is I'm still doing the Betting Weekly MLS podcast for Bet Rivers. It is at our weekly MLS podcast. We took last week off because, of course, no games due to the international break, but we are coming back. We actually have our episode recording tomorrow. We drop every Wednesday or Thursday morning, depending. And hey, we've still got 2 more real slates before decision day is over. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. So that's, I think, something that I certainly need to go and give a follow. So I don't miss any of those episodes because obviously I do a little bit of MLS betting myself there for FTN bets, but I know I really enjoy listening to your insights as somebody who's been watching the league and a fan of the league for longer than Ian and I. And folks in the Austin FC space actually might be able to put a face with the name if they remember back the away Atlanta match this year for Austin FC. I was in the Los Verdes Slack just kind of poking around, and Thomas's face pops up. And somebody had posted one of your betting TikToks in there, and so it was small world type of thing. Again, there's a channel for sports betting in that Slack. So maybe we'll see some more Thomas clips pop up there. But I say that to say this: you are not obviously unfamiliar with Austin FC. And so I wanted to, before we jump into the preview of the Vancouver match coming up this weekend, I kind of wanted to get your take as an outsider of the Austin FC fan community here, because we've had guests on before that are either in the stadium every game or are streaming matches, and they live outside the city of Austin. And you, as a San Jose Earthquakes fan, what, I guess, how do you see Austin FC now, knowing what they did last year in relatively disappointing fashion? Like, how do you see this team, like you said, now 2 game days away from their first MLS playoff appearance?
I mean, I feel like a lot of people are still even discounting them, but I've certainly been no stranger to the success that they've had this season, especially because the sports books were so slow to adjust, which they always are with Major League Soccer because no one's paying attention. Mm-hmm. And so the fact that they were able to go out and rip off so many away victories to start the year. For most of the season, they were the best road team in the league statistically until, of course, Red Bulls went off on their tear, and that's just been really weird for the statistics. But I was able to cash this team as 5-1, 4-1, 3-1 favorites, you name it. Dogs. They were just plus money machines on the road against inferior teams, and I was just hoovering up the points. But I was actually talking with my buddy on Sunday during the NFL football slate about Major League Soccer and specifically Austin, because he asked me, is this team still luck boxing their way to all these wins? And I told him, no, they haven't been that lucky. It hasn't been luck. This team is just legitimately that good right now. And I was like, really? And he goes into the stats and he starts looking at the big chance and expected goals versus actual goals rate. And I did kind of convince him. I said, no, look at this team. They're slightly outperforming their expected goal metric, but it's not like they've been insanely lucky by any stretch of the term. They're just that good.
Yeah, and I think they certainly have, in the last 2 months, come back down closer to those underlying numbers. I think certainly with the results and this fan base, I can tell you, Thomas, impatient, I think, and maybe putting it nicely. And I think Ian and myself, as much as we try to have perspective, can certainly get sucked into that mindset at times as well. A lot to talk about today. Like we said, international break coming to an end here. So we'll get into some of that. Some of the youth national team, obviously Owen Wolf, Micah Burton, getting out there for their respective squads. The national team playing 2 friendlies. We'll discuss those results, maybe some thoughts heading into the World Cup. But again, Vancouver on the slate for Austin this coming Saturday night. And the history between these 2 teams last year, both losses in their 2 meetings, losses for the good guys, I should say. At home, Ian, you may remember the Ryan Gauld brace late in the home match, the home loss against Vancouver, the Scottish Messi, as they call him.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
I do not remember it.
And then, I know you'll remember this one, and our old dear center back Matt Beasler may not. And that's probably a poor form to joke about that, because the match on the road, Austin once again going up 1-0, this time on a Driussi header in stoppage time of the first half off the assist from our former number 10. And then Matt Beasler, his last game in his career, got another concussion in that one, ended up out the rest of the season and then retired. And once he went out, Austin was out of subs, down a man, and gave up 2 goals. This season, though, obviously the one we have played already, it was the match after the Open Cup loss against San Antonio FC, a 3-0 win for Austin. Maxi Urruti brace and Sebastian Driussi put the 3rd one in the back of the net. Now, looking towards this match, Vancouver, and we'll pull the 538 MLS model in here because, again, 538, maybe not everybody's favorite, but it's a fun model to look at, especially when we're approaching the playoffs here. Vancouver's still a 3% chance at the 7 seed, so obviously extremely unlikely, but they still do have something to play for here. So I guess just as we look at that, I'll throw it to Thomas first. Looking at this Vancouver team, obviously still scrapping until the fat lady sings. They've brought on Julian Gressel in that midseason trade from DC United. I don't believe he was with Vancouver when they came to Austin earlier this season. Lucas Cavallini, I believe, is back from his stomping suspension. Ian, I don't know if you saw this. I think it was against Nashville 4 games back for Vancouver. Cavallini stepping on a Nashville player who was on the ground intentionally and suspended since then. So, but Thomas, with Cavallini coming back, Gressel there, Galden, and former Austin FC player, little Sebastian Berhalter, son of Coach Greg, right? Actually getting a lot of minutes for this team this season, which I think tells us all we need to know about what should happen with this result. But how do you see Austin matching up with this Vancouver team going north of the board?
It's tough because of how Jekyll and Hyde this Vancouver team has been this season. If this game was in Austin, it's an easy prediction to call the Austin victory here. They're plus 190 right now on the money line on the road here. And I like the value that you're getting on that a little bit, but I don't know that it's really that far off over what the number should be, especially given Austin's late road form. 3 straight losses before this break. I think they need to come out firing here and really start setting up and saying, okay, we had our dip in form. We need to get back to that peak that we were at in the mid-season if we're going to be serious about contending for a title this year. Vancouver's only plus 120 here, which goes to show you that the bookmakers are not confident that this team's going to be able to win this game. But at home this season, Vancouver is 9-3-4 compared to just 2 wins and 4 draws on the road, 10 losses there. Wow. And their goal differential at home is only plus 3. They're 23-4 and 20 against, but they've won 4 out of their last 5 at home, which is in stark contrast to, you look back, their last 5 overall. They have 3 straight losses followed by the wins over the Galaxy and the Sounders, which are teams that were scrapping for playoff results here. Austin certainly is better than them, but as much as the resume doesn't jump off the page to me for Vancouver, it's all about what I don't know about how well Austin is going to be able to show up here. Again, coming off those 3 straight road losses, this is a team that made their money on that road form and being able to pick up these points on the road. And then here we go. You lose 3-0 to the Sounders, who this Vancouver team just beat. You lose 3-0 to Nashville, who also beat Vancouver 3-0. And then you had the Portland loss. The Nashville tie was something that I like to see, and the win over RSL was pretty good for Austin, but I don't know that I'm confident enough to bet this game with this team, which is unfortunate because I've been very confident taking Austin on the road so far this season. I do think that we'll see some goals here. I see an over 2.5 at like minus 150. It's a lot of juice to lay, but at this point in the season, if you're getting a 2.5 number, I'm taking it.
Yeah, I don't hate that call at all. And as you mentioned, the Austin FC kind of picking their form up a little bit. You know, you mentioned a loss and a draw to Nashville, the 3-0 loss to Seattle, which was a back-to-back 3-0 loss to Seattle and away Nashville, and then Vancouver 3-0 over the Galaxy and 2-1 over the Sounders in their last 2 games. Ian, obviously, you and I in the stadium for, well, you all but the last 2 Austin FC matches, but you were watching just as closely on the stream, and we've been recapping those games on the pod. How are you feeling about Austin coming out of this break? You know, they scrimmaged or had a friendly against El Paso Locomotive this past weekend at the Performance Center, but coming off the tie against Nashville, how are you feeling going up to Vancouver in this one? Austin only needs 1 point to secure that 2nd seed.
I think Thomas made some great points there, and I don't know if I want to say trap game per se, but the trajectory of the team had switched a bit. I still am not like super satisfied with that 1-1 draw with Nashville. Our form did, we did look better than those 3 consecutive losses there. But like Thomas pointed to, they've won some tough games recently. And I think getting out to a good start will be imperative for us, even though, we've hung our hat on being this comeback squad and that we can do anything on the road. And it's been great that we have allowed ourselves to have this cushion. We started out hot, started out establishing ourselves, but to be taken seriously, like Thomas said, as a threat to win the title, we got to take care of this team, even though it's going to be a bit of a fight. But I feel confident. I don't want to say trap game, but the layover we've had a little time here. Hopefully we can keep the focus going forward and get some more momentum as we move into the playoffs.
I think the break came at a really good time for Austin because we don't see the same thing that we saw last year with the international break coming at a weird time right before the playoffs that greatly impacted the 1 seeds. But for a team like Austin to get a couple weeks to get a week off here and be able to say, okay, let's get our legs back, let's be fresh. I like their chances to rebound here and really be organized for the playoffs.
Yeah, especially I don't know how much attention you're paying to the rotation that Austin makes in their lineup. It hasn't been much over the last 3 months, but we did see in the double game week before the break, specifically in that Nashville match, we saw Johan Romagna get the start over Julio Cascante. Ruben Gabrielson came out in that match. Cascante subbed on for him, and the Cascante-Gabrielson pairing has played a ton of minutes. I think Gabrielson the most minutes for the club this year. And so I think that's a very apt point that the break couldn't have come at a better time. And now, we've talked about that the last thing that we want this team to do is back into the playoffs or back into their seed, right? You want to win and take that seed and take your position in the playoffs and have that confidence headed into your first ever playoff match and a home playoff match at that. So we also saw, obviously, Thomas, I know you saw that Moussa Djite hat trick against RSL, which was really out of nowhere because I think until that point, most people trying to look at this Moussa Djite signing and his performance at Austin objectively would say it hasn't been a success. We won't call it a failure before that hat trick, but certainly not something that's, standing out and, that the extra time guys are talking about frequently. So Djite did get the start last time out. So Ian, as we do every time, lineup changes that you think will happen, that you want to see, and then give me your prediction. I don't think today is the first time you predict an Austin FC loss or draw on the podcast. So how much is Austin FC winning by, I guess, is how you should close it out.
Thomas said 2.5.
Is the over under, yeah.
Okay. Man, I could see it being a 3-2 game for sure. I think there's going to be goals. Both teams should be fresh, ready to roll. So we'll see some nets here. As far as lineup changes, I'm good with the 11 that we've been rolling with.
Yeah, you should be playing the full lineup.
Yeah. Well, what about on the wing there, Ian? Because Thomas, we've Emiliano Rigoni is now on this roster, but Ethan Finley is having, I think, kind of a resurgent year. Certainly producing more than what was expected of him by the team. Signing him to be a backup for the old DP, and now the fact that he's performed so well, maybe holding off the new DP for the spot on the right wing there. I guess as somebody who, again, has been more familiar with this league, a fan of this league longer than Ian and I, how do you think that should play out between Rigoni and Finley? How should Coach Wolf handle that situation? Because from my point of view, and again, I'm coming from a just mostly basketball background before getting into this team, a guy that you pay that much, you don't bring off the bench. You throw the talent out there, and that's how you figure it out in conjunction with obviously practice time. But you don't get a ton of that at this point of a season. And coming off the international break, I'm of the mind that Emiliano Rigoni should be in the starting lineup going forward. But that has not seemed to be the prevailing opinion in the Austin FC fan base. How do you, as a San Jose fan, look at that situation, and how would you treat it?
I mean, again, as a San Jose fan, I'm not really familiar to having controversies brought on by too much talent at a position. It's been much more the other way for us over time.
Yeah.
I honestly think that you have to play the hot hand. You have to play whoever's in the better form because they're the one you're going to want to be riding with through the playoffs.
Okay. Well, I think go ahead.
I think it'll be telling here because if what we've assumed has been the reason why Rigoni has not been starting, which is he hasn't been able to get acclimated enough with our system, or he hasn't been in a good enough shape with this break. Now we should not be worrying about that, right?
Yeah.
Like this should be telling. Like this should be where we see him starting consistently going forward.
Right. And I think that's what I want to see certainly on Saturday against Vancouver, because if they can get a win, or of course even a point, they sew up that second seed. The last game doesn't mean anything. And then, I still think in that getting ahead of ourselves here, but I do think in that finale against Colorado at home that you want to start your guys and you want to get minutes to anybody who's going to play in the playoffs, but certainly try to rotate guys like Driussi and maybe Danny Pereira, so he doesn't pick up a yellow or what have you, right? And just get some guys minutes in that final game, and hopefully you're not playing for anything, and you can just use it to stay informed. But I kind of hijacked your lineup there, your score prediction. So you want to see that same 11 with Rigoni instead of Finley, as I understand it.
Correct.
And just to not take up too much time, I'm right there with you for this match. But give us your prediction here.
I said 3-2.
Oh, that's right. 3-2. And I thought you brought up a good point that this team is prone to getting into some high scoring affairs. 5-2 loss against the Galaxy back in August, a 6-4 win over Toronto at the end of July. So just in the last 2 months, we've seen this team, partake in some real shootouts. So 3-2. You might have taken that prediction right out of my mouth. Thomas, I'll throw it to you. Any thoughts on the lineup? And if not, that's fine. A score prediction.
Yeah, I can't really speak directly to the lineup, but I think for a score prediction, I think we see this more in the 2-1 neighborhood. I mean, you're looking at the goals conceded per match here at home for Vancouver. It's only 1.25 per game on an expected 1.5.
Mm-hmm.
I see Austin being able to get 2 here, given the attack that they have. And Vancouver's big problem is that they haven't scored a ton of goals so far this season. They're not a prolific offensive team. But the Austin defense at times can have a little lapse. I see this being 2-1.
You got to always account for potentially just giving the ball away in the
exactly
the other team.
Yeah, and like you said, Vancouver will certainly give it up. Negative 17 goal differential on the season. I'm gonna go 3-1 here. I don't see Austin getting out with a clean sheet. And Vancouver, I think this season has had multiple points won in the last 5 to 10 minutes of matches, specifically at home. And so I don't see that happening here, but I see Austin having a hard time getting out of there against a team that needs to win to keep their playoff hopes alive, getting out of there with a clean sheet. But I do think the offense gets back on track here. And if Austin can pull off 2 wins to end the season here, they will exceed 60 points, which obviously with the goal being, I think at the beginning of the season, Danny Pereira said 50 goals was the mark. This team already at 55 points. Correct. With 64 goals scored. So again, having that perspective is always good. I'll say 3-1. International break. Obviously, we said the match against El Paso Locomotive at the Performance Center this past Saturday. I didn't see a ton of coverage out there. I know a couple people went out to Verde Hill. Thomas, we have a hill next to the Performance Center here. Brand new facility. Fantastic area out there. But you can sit on the hill and maybe bring some binoculars, and you can see the happenings at all the scrimmages. Owen Wolf obviously went with the U19s to the Slovenia Nations Cup, which was between the United States, Malta, Scotland, and I'm forgetting the third team. But it was just a random assortment of teams. And I think maybe I need to learn more about the youth national system to understand these events that these teams play, and just seemed like a little classic, right, Ian, if I could put it in basketball terms. Mm-hmm. Owen Wolf did not play the first match, and I think that was somewhat understandable given the fact that he played 60 minutes against Nashville. and then flew out to Slovenia. But he did play in that second match, did score a goal, and then got sent off.
Oh,
So he did not play against Scotland this morning, but the U.S. did get the win and took home the silverware from the Slovenia Nations Cup. So
what do you do?
So I actually did not see the infraction. I only got to watch the first, I think, 55 minutes of that game, and I think he actually scored like right after I turned it off. And then I'll shout out Kevin Morris, who posted the highlight of the goal on Twitter. But no, I did not see the fouls. I don't know if it was a straight red or 2 yellows, but obviously couldn't play today. So a short and sweet appearance for Owen out there. And then Micah Burton playing with the U17s. Did not see any news about him scoring, but got some playing time out there. I guess, Thomas, the thing I want to ask you about here is Owen Wolff, Micah Burton. We've had 6 players called up to the various youth national team levels this year from our academy. I think Philadelphia is kind of Philadelphia and FC Dallas, from what I can tell, are kind of the academies that you want to model yourselves after. Certainly Philadelphia. I feel like I learn about new players that they have either in Europe or at the national team level. I look up these players' histories and, of course they came from Philly's academy. When you look at a guy like Owen Wolff, and certainly I don't expect you to know anything about Micah Burton, these under 17 guys, but do you think players like Owen Wolff have an actual chance to make the senior national team? Or do you think this is just like the fact that he continues to be called up to the U19s? Do you think that's an indicator that he has a chance to one day be a member of the senior national team? Or do you just think he's not that caliber of player?
I mean, I think there's a reasonable chance, but I think that like every player, you have to be able to get over to Europe at this point. If you're going to come from MLS, your chances are now much, much more diminished. There's the whole myth about Berhalter having a quota of MLS players that he has to bring up. That's not true.
Right.
But I think what it all comes down to, and you see it with a lot of the guys from Philly and Dallas, especially. I mean, look at the actual national team and the amount of representation there. Of course, Weston McKennie being the big headline name, but it is all about if you're able to make your way over to Europe, and especially now, if you can be raising eyebrows and getting over there, that's what's going to be your best shot at getting up to the senior team level. But the good news is, if you're playing with the U19s and not like the U23s, you've got a pretty decent shot, because the U23 team, especially given the amount of youth on the senior team now, that's just kind of the guys that weren't good enough to make the senior team at this point.
Right.
But that U19 team can be a little more predictive. That's why I care more about that success of the 21 and unders versus the 23s in Olympic qualifying and all of that, because those are the guys that have the best chance to make it to the senior team one day.
That makes a lot of sense to me, and gives me some more hope that maybe we see Owen Wolff wearing the red, white, and blue for the senior team. The Austin FC did in the last month announce a partnership with PSV there in the Dutch league. So maybe Owen Wolff gets loaned to PSV or sent to PSV, and maybe that's his key.
If you're getting players I love that partnership, because if you're getting players to a league like the Dutch league, you're honestly better off than guys that are going to a team like Norwich with Josh Sargent. The best thing that happened to Josh Sargent was Norwich getting relegated last year, because he was a non-factor in the Premier League, but then they dropped down to the Championship, and all of a sudden this guy's out there scoring goals, and he made it up to the national team camp for these last 2 friendlies, and there's good reason for that. You're better off being a good player on a team in a bad league than you are being a just player on a better team like in a Premier League. I don't think our players should be focused on going to the Premier League nearly as much as they should be going somewhere where they're going to get the service that they're going to need, where their team's going to be able to excel and put them in the best positions to succeed, because that's what's going to make you a better player and get you to the point where you can go and play in the bigger leagues, rather than going to one of these teams that's a terrible team getting beaten up in a top league. I'd rather be at a place like, if you could be at PSV, where you're
Yeah.
getting minutes against weaker opposition and just getting better and being able to raise your profile and grow as a player, that's going to be a way better step up.
Yeah, so hopefully we see that partnership, start to bear some fruit in that manner, whether it's Owen Wolf or any of those younger guys. And obviously Austin FC, one of the franchises that will finally get a next pro team next year, so they can, the Musa Gites, Rodney Redis. I don't know if you know Rodney Redis, Thomas, but much maligned here for Austin as our first ever signing, still looking for his first goal. Okay, so well, you mentioned, or we were talking about how you get up to the senior national team. Let's talk the big show now. The senior national team playing 2 friendlies over this international break across the pond. First, the 2-0 loss to Japan, and then the 0-0 draw against Saudi Arabia today. I believe we did see some rotation in the squad. Ricardo Pepi started up top, former FC Dallas product. So Thomas, before I let Ian and I give our more elementary look at what happened over this break, what does this mean in your eyes for the U.S. heading into the last 50 or so days before they kick off against Wales in their first World Cup match? Because certainly not results that look great to the naked eye, right? Like, what did you see from these 2 matches this weekend?
I mean, like you said, not great. I was talking with John Strong after the game today, and all I said to him was, woof. And his response was, I am at the airport. I'm having a beer and prepping for MLS. It was a day to forget for sure, on a break that's been one to forget. And that's really the last thing that you want to see going into the World Cup here. And I think it's a cascade of so many different things going on right now. You've got the Pulisic battle at Chelsea, where he's not really getting much playing time, and it's clearly now affecting his play on the national team. Weston McKennie is in poor form right now. We did have some injuries. Yunus Musa clearly is one of the most important players that we can have out there for this midfield, because they were so disjointed from the attack. They missed having him out there for sure. He needs to get healthy for the World Cup. I think he will be, but it's still very clear that there are some players who we don't really have an answer for if they're hurt. Fortunately, we have an answer for Gio Reyna, because we haven't been able to rely on him, and then he goes out in the 30th minute in this game. Berhalter said afterwards that was hamstring tightness, and it was a precautionary thing where he was like, and all the more, let's play with the kid gloves with Reyna and try and keep him in bubble wrap as much we can. But the talent there that we just might never see come to fruition is so painful. And it's that combination, of the guys being hurt right now, the guys being out of form. And now you're looking around like, okay, well, where was the team of last summer? You saw it in Berhalter's post-match interview, where he's saying that they weren't playing with a lot of confidence right now. We were built on this team being confident, and I'm pretty sure it was Stu. I think it was Stu. I forget who it was, who said in the post game, this is what we were told. Like, this team is young, hungry, has swagger, and where is any of that right now? I really don't like the fact that they've won 1 game against World Cup opposition in their last 7, and the other 6 they haven't scored in. That's really not great to see. The only good news is everybody else in the group has been terrible. Wales certainly hasn't looked good. England's looked awful, and Iran is Iran. They might end up being a tougher out than we think, though. It's going to be interesting to see what happens there, and we really will need to pick up those points, especially if England manages to see Iran get a result against them in game 1, because that could be bad for us in game 2. The good news is, and I'm rambling here, but we've seen this team come alive. We've seen this team come up in some of the biggest circumstances possible over the last year, 2 years, especially the games against Mexico. And I know that the Gold Cup was a B team game, but the Nations League was one of the biggest stages that they've had so far, and they passed that test with flying colors. We know that this team has so much talent. The question is Berhalter the coach to get the most out of them? And the other thing is, I think Jordan Pefok actually ends up making it to the World Cup roster. I think that I think you're going to leave a guy like Ricardo Pepi off and bring Pefok instead when you count on form, when you look at how good Pefok has been, And what Berhalter did kind of say of being, I know we've seen PFOC, like I wanted to get some of these other guys a chance here. My hope with that is that those other guys, they pooed the bed so hard in this window that Berhalter's going to turn around and be like, all right, you're out and PFOC's in. Because, and again, with John Strong, when talking to him, the only player who's not going to Qatar for sure is John Brooks. Everyone else is on the table.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really hope that means that we do get a little more of that. And also Timothy Weah. He wasn't really playing lately. I think he brings a very different aspect to this team. But it's just, I don't think that Berhalter is playing the guys in a system that is going to most bring them out. I think that he's trying to make the players fit the system, and you can't do that at the national team level. End of rant.
Yeah, I mean, and that's it's funny that you talk about the system, right? Because what we see here in Austin is that same system. Josh Wolf being a disciple of Coach Berhalter. And I agree with you about the PFOC and Pepe decision there, but I'm going to agree with you because I can only cheer for so many FC Dallas players at once. And when the team came through Austin back in June and played Granada, 5-0 win for the U.S. And all 5 goals from FC Dallas players. I'm tired of them scoring at Q2 Stadium. Yeah, man. I mean, it's certainly disjointed at best right now, or that's the feeling I get surrounding this team. And like you mentioned, this being the final tune-up that we get to see, right? It doesn't feel great for our chances going up against the group where, it's not a group of death or anything like that, but there's no walkovers in this group. Ian, I know, again, like you probably haven't been super focused on the U.S. national team friendlies, but like I know Wales and England, and I think neither of us would say we know much about Iran outside of the fact that they are ranked, I think, a little bit higher in those FIFA rankings than most casual national soccer team fans like you and myself would think. How do you feel about this group play coming up in late November, knowing that this team is struggling?
I don't know if I could add much more to that conversation from what Thomas just presented with us.
Yeah, laid down all the knowledge on
yeah, like I was like, shit, man. Like, yeah, I feel like I know way more now. No, I don't know. I mean, obviously, England, Wales, I know some of the big names there. Obviously, the history with those two countries. Definitely looking forward to beating Gareth Bale up again. Let that be known. So yeah, I'm hoping for the best, and I'll be much more tuned in once we're rolling over there in Qatar.
There are two items of good news, 2 silver linings that I'm pulling out of this, though.
Hit me.
Number one, you mentioned that there's no walkover in this group. The good news is there's no power in this group either. There's no Brazil. Every single one of these games is winnable. If we play at our best, I have no doubt in my mind we can beat England, who is, first off, playing in a major tournament. So therefore, they're going to fall on their face. But Wales is beatable, and Wales is playing in just as poor form as we are right now.
Yeah.
Iran, they're the closest thing to a walkover. I think they're going to be a little tougher, but one of their best defensive players did just come out in support of the protests and the political unrest going on over there right now. There's a non-zero chance that leaves him off of the squad.
Yeah. Like, wasn't it multiple players? I saw pictures of that today where I think they covered all of their national insignia during the anthem is what it was.
Wow. Yep. Like, this is a big deal over there that's not really being covered on American news as much. Yeah. But I mean, speculating on foreign politics here for a bit on this soccer podcast, there's potential for a regime change here in Iran and immense political turmoil that will factor into a lot of these players being able to play in the World Cup. Will it galvanize the team, though? Yeah, we'll see. Like, it could go any way. Like, we can't prognosticate on that too much, but any of these games are absolutely winnable. We should be able to, if we play at our best, get enough results to, at the very least, make it out of the group, if not win it outright, because again, I think we can beat England, but we have to play at our best. And that brings up the second thing that I'm hoping for here. It might be too much to ask, but we have 50 days left, and most of these players are not going to be sitting on their butts for those 50 days. Most of them are going to be out there playing in Europe with top European competition. And my hope here is that this camp lights a fire under everybody, which it should, saying, I need to be getting to my best here. I need to be ready to go. I need to be ready to play. And when the lights come on for that World Cup game against Wales, everybody is ready. Everybody is firing on all cylinders. Knock on wood, we have a healthy squad, and they're out there ready to galvanize and do some damage, because guess what? Now no one's believing in them. Now the hype train is gone. They don't have that backing that they thought they were going to have going in. And American teams do better as an underdog.
I was just about to say, I think that is what is different from this team over the last few months compared to like last summer when they found all that success and the hype really started to build for this squad, is that they were no longer viewed as an underdog, just kind of in the general zeitgeist of the team, the international soccer community. And I think that's a great point, that's going to return over the next 7-8 weeks or something like that until that first match. And the fact that all these guys will be playing in their various leagues, or the majority of them. And there's a lot of time too, just for I won't say sting is probably an overstatement to describe the last two matches, but just the letdown. I think that's fair of these two friendlies. Like I don't think we saw really like much to be excited about. And to us to have this couple months, MLS playoffs, you know, the European leagues are going. In America, we also have NFL, NBA, et cetera, to distract us in the sports world from that. So, you know, we can maybe be a little bit rejuvenated and get back behind this team, especially if they come out against Wales and start, turning their form around. So last soccer bit here before we kind of get into some other nonsense, which may be a little bit of a preview of what this podcast looks like in the MLS offseason. Just taking a peek at what happened in the MLS. There was one match that, Thomas, your team played in this past weekend. I guess it was a makeup match from maybe a cancellation or reschedule earlier in the season. A 3-2 win for the LA Galaxy over your Earthquakes. First of all, the tifo that your fans put up there. I think the maybe some court jesters, some clowns, which then Chicharito with a brace in this game did mock in his celebration. What did you take away from that match? Because Galaxy fighting for playoff positioning here, that game was definitely not meaningless.
The game wasn't meaningless for them, but it was certainly meaningless for San Jose. Another year, another wooden spoon to add to the collection, probably. Although DC United should be able to keep us at bay for that title.
You're like 4 points clear of them, right? Something like that. Okay,
so we should be okay, but it sucks that this game got played when it did, because the state of California especially Stanford, dealt with power outages during some of the fires earlier in the summer. That's what got this game postponed now, because it was played at Stanford Stadium. This is always one of the coolest games to go to in all of MLS. The Cali Classico at Stanford. I've been to a couple of the most wild ones. You had the Shea Salinas overtime winner. You had the you had the Alan Gordon famous one a couple years before that. There have been so many amazing moments, and this one just didn't have the luster, because what are the Quakes really playing for? They're clearly playing out the string. It's been another lost season here, and LA needs to make the playoffs. They're in fifth now, only 3 points clear. They're not safe by any means, as RSL is now the team at the bottom of the heap there in the logjam that is the Western Conference. But LA needed to win this game, and the score wasn't as the game was not as close as the score suggested. The second goal for the Quakes was very much a garbage time goal. This team was not really in it, but it's kind of what's to be expected for the Quakes at this point. There's not much that you can take out of it other than a rivalry game when a season's already been lost.
It's funny to hear you, and obviously we both know that the Quakes have struggled this season and for some time now, but it doesn't feel that way to us Austin fans, because we've played you guys 5 times now and we're still winless. So I'm hoping like maybe you coming on the podcast can break whatever curse you guys have over us.
There you go.
Ian, you sometimes can be an expert in the Wuju there. Like, what, do you think that there's some credence to that theory?
I think it's confirmed at this point.
Well, it's the fact that the Quakes go to Texas and they win. That's just the only thing because it's technically home soil. The Houston Dynamo are just the old Quakes. So we have that advantage when we come to town here.
Okay.
But I remember it was 2 years ago, maybe 3. It was the year before Almeida signed. And the Quakes won 4 games that entire season. And 2 of them were against Minnesota, who was one of the worst teams in the league. And again, this was a wooden spoon year for the Quakes. Yeah. And the other 2 were against FC Dallas. And it was the year where they were like the best team in the league. And we beat them twice and Minnesota twice and didn't win another game the whole season. But that's just what the Quakes do. They're a weird team. They go and they win these weird games sometimes. But I'm kind of excited for what the new coach is going to bring. I think that Luchi Gonzalez is going to be an interesting manager, especially what he's been able to do with some of these players that he's been able to bring along. I'm excited about the potential for player development for this team because you look at you talk about youth national call-ups. The Quakes Academy, I think, led the league in call-ups. I know they led the league in the April call-ups. Yeah, they have a lot of talent in the U19 and U17 systems right now. And you have to hope that that's going to parlay into talent for the actual team because I don't think the talent that they have is good enough to be sold to Europe without playing for them. I think that this is still very much a club in that stage of these guys are going to need to play for us because we're trying to cheap out the roster a little bit because that's the biggest problem for San Jose. The ownership doesn't want to spend money and invest in the team. We saw it be the struggle for Almeida, and we'll see what Gonzalez can do with them. But until this team stops acting like they're a small market and tries to really harness the financial backing of Silicon Valley and do more to be a big player and be the Bay Area version of the LA teams, we're going to see more of the same. Nothing's going to change.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense to me. I do want to go back to, you mentioned that the Houston Dynamo are the old Quakes, 2 MLS Cups immediately after coming over from San Jose. If you're a Houston fan, are you claiming those 2 titles? Like, are you using that in, let's say banter with Dallas or Austin fans? Like, hey, we have 2 cups, but it was with another franchise's players. Like, we are both biased in this argument. How would you feel about that?
I mean, it is your franchise. Like, you have that history to it. You don't get to claim. The way I see it is you don't get to claim both. The old Dynamo doesn't get to claim the 01 and the 03.
Sure. And I don't think they do. So I won't throw any of those Houston fans under the bus in that fashion. But
were they banging on any trash cans during those 2 championships? Was that going on?
You never know. That's definitely been around that cheating around those Houston teams.
Cheating,
cheating schemes.
My hot take with that is everybody needs to build a bridge and get over it. Like,
for the baseball, I don't.
It's time to move on. It's time.
Why? Why would we move on? Burn those bridges.
Well, okay. Last soccer thing here. Last MLS thing. The other important games on the docket this weekend. We actually have one tonight, kicking off in about 30 minutes. We're recording this Tuesday night, the 27th. Seattle taking on FC Cincinnati. Playoff implications for both sides, both conferences here. Saturday, Colorado and FC Dallas. Obviously, FC Dallas needing a win to keep their hopes alive for the 2 seed. Other Western Conference battles here. LA Galaxy, Real Salt Lake. That'll be the nightcap there on Saturday. Thomas, your Earthquakes taking on Minnesota. Obviously, Minnesota needing a win. The face you're making to me right now, the people can't see it, but I can. You do not seem super confident in that one. Sunday, Portland, LAFC, another important match. LAFC trying to, I believe, now in the driver's seat for the Supporters' Shield if they win out. And Portland fighting for playoff positioning there. Sporting KC, somewhat resurgent over the last month or so. Willie Agata, Eric Tommy, kind of integrating themselves into that squad and playing very well. Johnny Russell looks a little bit reinvigorated with those new additions. So Sporting and Seattle there Sunday, and then Nashville and the Houston Dynamo close out our weekend. 7th seed, obviously the overwhelming favorite to be the opponent for Austin FC. Austin FC 99% chance per 538 to be that 2 seed. So right now, the percentage chances for the 7 seed out west have shifted with that Galaxy San Jose result right now. Minnesota, 25% chance to be that 7 seed. Portland at 24. RSL 18, followed by the Galaxy at 12, Nashville at 10, Seattle at 8, and Vancouver still holding on to that 3% chance. Let's just stick with the 3 most likely here, that being Minnesota, Portland, and Real Salt Lake. Ian, we've seen all of these teams very recently in our Austin FC schedule. Out of those 3, who do you prefer Austin to face in the first round?
I'm going to go with Portland.
Okay.
And Thomas is shaking his head, and I was going to get some reactions there. I still think it's Portland. I think that the last time we played them, the results of that game was not indicative of that game at all. We were all over their ass. And if you want to talk about lucky and unlucky in a season, that was an unlucky game for Austin FC. I know that they are, a stalwart of the league, that they're tested, they're battle tested. They got some veterans. Out of those 3, that is my choice, and I'm going to stick to it. I think we owe them one there. And like I said, we were really all over them, and we could have blown the lid off that game very early.
Yeah.
So let's kick it to Thomas. I want to hear what he's got there.
Yeah, I imagine it's going to be about don't play teams from the Northwest in the playoffs, but Thomas, take it away.
I want nothing to do with playing Portland. I actually have to go and get a futures ticket on them before too long, because 45-1 on a team that is hot right now. They got 4 straight wins and then a draw. It's been just fantastic for them when they needed to turn it on since the end of August here. That win over Seattle, the win over Austin on the road in Austin, the Atlanta win, then Minnesota, and then the draw against Columbus, who has been just the pluckiest team that I want to see put it all together and make a good playoff run, but they're just not quite getting the wins that they need to be getting. I don't want anything to do with playing a Portland team right now who has been able to get it done every which way, at home, on the road. I would much rather be taking on Minnesota. Yeah, you haven't had them have a win in the last 5 games that they've played. They're not a team in form. I want whoever is scratching and clawing, not a Portland team that's been steamrolling right now.
Yeah, I think that makes some sense to me. And I was eyeing that Minnesota form, as you said, right? Losers of 4 of their last 5 and winless in that span. But I'll go RSL here. I think that was my answer 2 weeks ago when we discussed this, and it's still my answer now, especially and I think both of these guys are supposed to be back, but they've been out so long, that being Damir Kreilach, their typical captain, and Bobby Wood, who has done some damage against Austin FC in the past. I just feel like they're a little bit more toothless than those other 2 teams on their counterattack. And that's where Austin has been burned over the last 2 months. 39 goals on the season in 32 matches played for RSL. Go ahead, Thomas.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but RSL's problem is they might not make the playoffs.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would love for them with that 18% chance to be the team that comes to Q2, and I also think the reason I would choose them over Minnesota, like kind of the tiebreaker for me, is that I respect the shit out of Emmanuel Reynoso and what he can do to change a game. And I don't want to see him in a knockout match, especially this first one, because the atmosphere is going to be wild. It's going to be loud and energetic at Q2, but you're also going to be able to cut the tension with a knife in a knockout scenario like that. And I just think RSL presents out of the 3, the easiest challenge, or the easiest way to advance to me out of those 3 teams is facing RSL.
I completely agree with you. Like if RSL makes it, I'd rather play them than anyone because you're look at the road form. They have 3 road wins this season. They've cleaned up at home with 8 wins, 5 draws apiece, and then 8 road losses, a -14 goal differential.
Yeah.
That's the team. That's the team you want to be taking on that has to come to you over a Minnesota team that, like you said, they have 6 road wins. They've been able to get it done in those spots. RSL is a team entirely built on home form, and that's not going to get it done in the playoffs.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Well, that and we'll warn all the listeners now. We always say if you're still with us here almost after a full hour, we appreciate you. This is going to conclude the soccer talk on this episode. And if you want to hear some discussion about some early season NFL and some NBA talk, Media Day just happened yesterday in the NBA. The preseason starts on Friday. We are 3 weeks to the day from the tip-off of the NBA regular season. So let's hit some of that American football first, because Thomas, I know you've been deep in those streets. E and myself in multiple season-long fantasy leagues together. Thomas, I think I've mentioned that 53-man roster dynasty league that I run.
That is
Ian
nuts.
and myself, the only 2 champions over the last 6 years. So certainly some big time competition between us 2 in that league, but we won't talk fantasy here. We'll talk actual NFL and fellas, just to, allow some of our listeners to come with us. I think the majority of the Austin FC fan base are going to be Dallas Cowboys fans or Houston Texans fans. The Cowboys coming off the Monday Night Football victory over their division rival Giants last night, now 2-1 on the season, and those 2 wins, right, without Dak Prescott. So I guess, E, I'll throw it to you first. I think maybe a Cowboys hater, maybe, but like trying to look at this team a little bit objectively here. Like, how do you feel about this squad after 3 weeks of, again, the NFL is a very short season?
That defense is balling. For sure. I think the Tyron Smith injury is what really soured me on them early in the season. And when he went down, I thought I was going to expose a lot of things for them. Obviously, Dak getting hurt now is, you don't want to be rolling with Cooper Rush, even though they were making some interesting arguments in that game.
He's 3-0 as a starter.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you guys about that. Like, is there a controversy here?
Didn't Jerry said he would love a quarterback You heard him say that?
I didn't, but of course he said that.
He said, I would love a quarterback controversy.
Yeah,
well, I was like, what?
He would love him some glory hole too.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see how the Eagles aren't just going to run away with that thing. They look
division
incredible. Yeah, the division there. They look incredible.
Cowboys at Philadelphia, October 16th. That's Sunday Night Football. So taking on division rival Washington this coming weekend, then at the Rams, then at the Eagles. So not an easy slate coming up for the Cowboys. Thomas, how are you looking at this team? Obviously, Cooper Rush quarterbacking this team to 2 wins. Zeke still, in my opinion, looking fairly washed. But this team, Tyron Smith out, right? Dak Prescott out. Michael Gallup was expected to play last night and then ended up sitting again. Dalton Schultz was out last night. So this team is getting it done early with a lot of key injuries. How do you look at the Cowboys?
Well, you talk about getting it done early, and then you got to look at some of the underlying metrics here for this team. The rush offense, mostly led by Tony Pollard, because he is the better running back in Dallas at this point. That's just a fact of life, and it's ridiculous that they feed Zeke constantly when he is not the better back. But you take their Massey Peabody ranking, they've got an 84 in rushing offense, but their scoring efficiency is terrible. It's just down at an 18. This team isn't good at putting the ball in the end zone where it needs to be. And I do think a lot of that is the fact that your offense is a mash unit. The offensive line is certainly a far cry from what it was a couple of years ago when it was the best in the league. But like you said, the defense has been able to get it done. My question for you on it is, how much of that has been who they are and how much of that has been who they've played? I don't think that this team is tremendously good. You saw them struggling even against the Giants last night. And to me, yeah, it's the Eagles' division to lose, and I don't see them doing it because they are just so unstoppably good right now.
Yeah.
I'm really scared about the potential for an Eagles-Bills Super Bowl because, guys, the city of Phoenix will not be able to handle both of those fan bases converging on the same weekend as the Waste Management Open.
Oh my God.
It's going to be pandemonium.
E, are you familiar with what the Waste Management Open is?
No, some sort of dumpster competition.
It is the greatest event in golf. It's a tradition unlike any other.
What?
Yes, it is the common man's golf event.
Yeah, you would love it.
Yes,
throwing beers on the fairway. And,
that's great.
Yeah, it's like the Happy Gilmore golf tournament of the PGA.
Truly is. Like, there is nothing quite like it. It is very much the rowdy. Everybody's getting drunk. Like you said, they're throwing beers on the green. Like, it is the most lit event in golf, and it's the same weekend as the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
John Daly's there?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The greatest athlete of all time.
I think the thing that sticks out to me about this Cowboys team, if we'll refocus on Dallas here, that's win against Cincinnati. And Cincinnati hasn't looked great. Obviously, a little bit of a Super Bowl hangover, I think, here coming out of the gate. I think they'll get back on track. But, I thought that was an extremely gutsy win. It told me a lot about this Cowboys team, that they're going to scratch and claw their way to still be in contention for one of those wild card spots, even within the absence of Dak Prescott, who now there's rumors that he's targeting a Week 5 return.
Oh, and I don't know. Cooper Rush is taking his job.
Right? Yeah, he better come back soon. So I don't know if we actually see Dak that early, especially if they keep winning. Why, no pun intended, why rush him back? But maybe Week 6, right, at Philadelphia, that division matchup, especially if they can get at least one win out of these next two, go into that game 3 and 2 and try to pull Philadelphia back, because Philadelphia, like you guys mentioned, looking like a juggernaut out in the NFC. Before we look at more of the league as a whole, Houston Texans 0-2-1. Obviously not the start that they wanted, but I don't think any of the Houston Texans fans, unless you're delusional, really expected much different from this team. And similar to the Cowboys, in my mind, this is a team that is finding a way to stay in games. They're just showing the lack of the talent disparity between them and a lot of teams in the league, and the lack of experience, because they have a lot of young guys on this roster. Tied the Colts. The Colts have also looked terrible. Lose by 7 to the Broncos, who also haven't looked great, and lose at the last second to the Bears. This team could be 3-0 or at least 2-1. They just haven't gotten the bounces down the stretch. Thomas, how are you looking at this Texans team? Do they have any hope of competing in this division, where I think at the beginning of the year, we didn't see maybe a clear favorite, but certainly most people were putting Colts and Titans at the top. Now, I think if you're asking me who wins this division, and they may be the favorites in Vegas now, the Jaguars look great.
Yes.
So, Thomas, how do you look at the Texans? Then we'll talk to E, and I'm sure he'll talk about Jacksonville.
Yeah, I'm curious myself. The Jaguars, not the favorites just yet. Still plus 220. Colts plus 105 at Bet Rivers. I bet the Texans to win the division preseason.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Was it a value play, or did you actually feel like they were going to win the division?
It was a value play. They're 80-1. They were 80-1 preseason. Wow. They're still 35-1 right now. Like you're still not taking a terrible line there. But what I looked at was at the start of it, I said they're a Matt Ryan injury away from the Colts, who are the favorites right now, being terrible. And it turns out they didn't even need him to be injured to be terrible. The Titans, it was easy to call them taking a step back. They were a fraud last year. And then you get rid of A.J. Brown. Your defense takes another step back. Like, Derrick Henry is not looking like Derrick Henry, which is very predictable when you're a running back with that much tread on the tires. Mm-hmm. My biggest surprise was that Jacksonville is actually good. Like, no one saw this coming. Turns out Urban Meyer was the problem all along. Who would have thought? But Jacksonville being this good really surprised me. But the Texans, you've seen it from what they've been able to do. They're still right in it just due to the fact that everybody in the division is terrible. It's so bad that they're still live to win the division even now, because you've got that advantage with the tie against the Colts. And this team this team was like 3 points away from sweeping the Titans last year. So that was all what told me Texas, like the Houston Texans, have a legitimate chance to do this, and 80-1 is the wrong number. I also took their win total because it was 4.5, and they were really saying that this team's not better than last year's team that won 4 games. Like, you've got a better coach in Lovie Smith. Davis Mills is another year in the league, and it's not a young team. They're not a roster on the rebuild. They actually have a lot of veteran players, so you're not dealing with the young team growing pains. I simply didn't think that they were truly tanking, and so I still like them to go over that win total. I think they can win 5 games here this season. Jacksonville's the only thing that threw a wrench in my plans, though.
Right. Well, and you mentioned that the team is not as young as maybe I thought it was. You look at the non-skill positions, right? The positions that matter a lot more to real football than just like fantasy football nerds like myself.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that, guys like Thomas will see and make good value bets on 80-1. Hardly anybody in the NFL should be an 80-1 number for winning their division. It's just there's so much volatility in a league that only plays 17 games. Your thoughts on the Texans, and then maybe like we look at the Jaguars, right? And sorry to Texans fans that we're talking about almost every other team in their division but them. But the craziest thing to me about the Jaguars is that they lost to the Commanders in week 1. I mean, they blanked the Colts 24-0. And then on the road, I mean, not the toughest place to play, a Chargers home game if you're a road team, but 38-10 against the Chargers. How are you looking at this division as a whole, I guess, is my question.
AFC South?
Yeah.
I mean, as usual, it's a crapshoot all the time. The Chargers win 2 for the Jags. Herbert out there, no Keenan Allen. That's definitely going to impact that game. Their front seven is legit, though.
Oh, well, Slater's out now, right? Their left tackle?
Yeah.
Is it for the year, Thomas?
I don't think it's for the year, but I could be wrong.
I think it's some time though, right? It's not like he's questionable coming into next weekend. I think I think he's going to miss some time, which that Chargers team is struggling, and now we're jumping all over the AFC, but that Chargers team is
he's out for the year.
I mean, and he's a Pro Bowl left tackle.
Yeah, that's tough.
And this team is already struggling to run the ball. You saw Austin Eckler got 4 carries. I don't know about I think I'm lucky and avoided drafting Austin Eckler in any of my, I think I'm in 8 season-long leagues this year, which is down from my average. Austin Eckler, 4 carries? I know you're trailing, but like,
he's not getting the passing work either.
Exactly. And you would think with Keenan Allen out that if he's not getting the carries, that means he has 8 receptions, but he just is not getting the work.
But bringing it back to Jacksonville, like, you probably got the best quarterback in your division. Ryan Tannehill's not better than Trevor Lawrence. Matt Ryan at this point doesn't look better than Trevor Lawrence. And Davis Mills, as much as I want to believe in Nick Foles, I don't know that General Mills is really going to be the guy. And Trevor Lawrence, like, everybody's quick to forget because of how terrible Urban Meyer was.
Yeah.
He was the second coming. He was the next Peyton Manning. And I still think that he can live up to that draft capital, especially the night and day difference between how he's looked last year and this year. And they got weapons in Jacksonville. You got a great 1-2 punch in James Robinson and Travis Etienne, although Robinson isn't going to be ripping off too many more of those 30, 40, 50-yard rushing touchdowns this season. But even your receivers, then Christian Kirk, you broke the bank for him, which was weird, but not a terrible pickup in terms of talent.
Paying off so far, right?
Yeah. And the defense has been good.
Yeah. I mean, I love the Olakun pickup from Atlanta there at the linebacker position. I thought that was great for them because he's, the Atlanta defense last year wasn't elite, but having a guy that is that active in the middle of the field, being able to kind of control the defense like he does, I was a big fan of that acquisition as well. And Doug Peterson, obviously the new coach of the Jaguars, has done some amazing things with quarterbacks in the past.
Yeah.
And has he had a quarterback as talented as this? I don't think so. So yeah, the Jaguars certainly a team to watch here early in the season. I guess as we close it out here, I'll throw it to you, E. It can be a team that we've talked about already, but give me a team that has surprised you, or you think their stock is kind of rising from where you saw them before the season started, and give me a team that you've been disappointed in.
I mean, I definitely did not foresee the Eagles looking this good in the first 3 games. But they've really impressed me. I'd say the team that has looked the most in shambles to me, like not in shambles, but from what I expected, I think the Rams have been really confusing. Their wins have also been confusing to me. But other than that, I want to talk about Cincinnati a little bit, just because I think they overachieved. And I thought the expectation maybe coming into this season was a little higher than it should have been, given the roster. But I do like them to bounce back as well, like you talked about. Obviously, that Bills-Miami matchup the other day, holy shit, that was incredible.
Yeah.
Miami looking super legit as well. And you had an interesting point the other night where they are doing their equivalent of the ground and pound through the air, where it's you're chasing Waddle and Hill around all day long, and then eventually they tire you out.
Right. Guarding those guys for 4 quarters.
Yeah.
Running all over the field.
Absolutely. So they've been very fun to watch as well. It's going to be another interesting season. I don't know how confident I feel about the Bills-Eagles Super Bowl prediction, but I do think that's definitely in the cards.
Yeah. I think, is that the chalk right now in Vegas? Are those the top 2 teams? I think the Bills are number 1, I think. As we pull up the futures.
The Bills are still 1. Yeah, the Eagles are tied with the Packers to be the chalk NFC team here. They're both 9-1.
Well, dude, the way that they're throwing the ball to me is the surprise, because we knew that their defense was above average at worst, I think is what you could say, potentially an elite defense when they're healthy, and they can run the shit out of the ball. But was Jalen Hurts going to take that step? And obviously the team went out and addressed it, getting A.J. Brown from Tennessee. And now you've got Devontae Smith seeing 2nd and sometimes 3rd defensive backs in terms of the depth chart. Like, this team is extremely dangerous on both sides of the ball.
The smart thing that they did was they're taking the fact, remember, Jalen Hurts was a 2nd-round pick. He's on a $1 million a year deal. So they took advantage of that contract and they said, we're gonna max out in the areas that matter, and we're gonna cheap out in other positions. So they look at things like safety and middle linebacker, and they say, we won't splurge as much here. And then they go to edge rusher, left tackle, and wide receiver. And they said, this is where we're going to allocate all of this bonus money that we have from not paying a quarterback. And so the offensive line is one of the league's best. You bring in A.J. Brown. So now you have one of the league's top receivers who's also still young. Like, this guy could be on this team for 10 years.
Absolutely.
And then you pair him with Devonta Smith. Now, all of a sudden, instead of throwing to Nelson Aguilar and Jalen Reagor, you've got good receivers to throw to. You combine it with that run game. And then defensively, you have the pass rush and the corners that you need to run a great defense here. All it came down to was Jalen Hurts being that guy, and you put your guy in the best position to possibly succeed. And so, sure, lo and behold, Jalen Hurts was able to make the most out of that. And that's why this team is so ridiculously good right now. I'm worried about the Bills.
Really?
Yeah. Like, this offense is fantastic, but now all of a sudden, the injuries are stacking up quick on defense. I know you'll get Tre'Davious White back, but you lose Micah Hyde for the year now. You've lost a couple key pieces on that defensive side that worries me a lot, especially if White comes back and he doesn't have quite that same step that he used to. This is a team that you're going to be able to beat in a shootout, and a team like Kansas City can still do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ian, when we were talking the other night, You were extremely high on the Chiefs still, where I think I was a little bit more trepidation with this Chiefs team. Obviously, both the Bills and the Chiefs lost this past weekend. The Chiefs taking the L to the Colts. I think with the Bills, fellas, this next month is going to be extremely telling. There's 3 tough games and a walkover in there for Buffalo. Unfortunately, that's my Steelers. But they also face Ravens on the road, Chiefs on the road, and then host the Packers in Buffalo. So I think we'll know a lot about this Buffalo team, injuries or not, over the last month. And if they're for real or not, obviously right now the favorite to win the Super Bowl.
You're going to win that Packers game.
Oh, yeah? Putting in
Like,
the call
for
a
sure.
month out.
Yeah, but the Packers are not that good, in my opinion.
I agree.
Like,
No, they're not.
What I'm seeing from this team, when they play a Bills, when they play a Chiefs offense, they aren't going to be able to score.
Nope.
Because this team is all about slow and methodical now. Without Devontae Adams, they lost that big play threat. They lost that guy who can get downfield, get vertical, and be that passing weapon that Alan Lazard simply is not. And they've only had one good quarter of football, this offense. They put up 3 touchdowns in the second quarter against the Bears, and they have 3 touchdowns the rest of the season so far. There's a lot to worry about with this Packers team for sure. And
Sure.
I'm not at all high on them here. But we also haven't talked about the fact that there's a rivalry game this week.
Yeah, which one?
Yeah, the Jets play the Steelers.
You're right. Thomas hasn't brought it up yet. Jets fan, as I just said, Steelers fan. Is Zach Wilson playing this week, Thomas?
I think he is. I think they're looking at trying to bring him back. I mean, Joe Flacco, they're going to have to figure out what they're going to do.
Is he better than Flacco?
They're going to have to figure out what they want to do, because you're not throwing the ball 52 times with Zach Wilson. Like, you shouldn't be doing it with Joe Flacco, but they did. But you really shouldn't be doing it with Zach Wilson. And this is the game to do it. Like, you've gotten through the gauntlet of the AFC North now. The Steelers without TJ Watt, you got to be feeling good.
Can't breathe on a quarterback right now. They cannot even breathe on a quarterback.
And now Minka Fitzpatrick might not play.
I have not seen that, but I wouldn't be surprised the way this season's going.
Let me double check on this, but if that's the case, because I saw something, he might have a concussion.
Yeah, well, I'm not surprised. But my thing with that Pittsburgh defense is that team will always be in every single game. I don't care who they play, if they have Watt, Hayward, and Fitzpatrick healthy and on the field. If one of them is gone, especially TJ Watt, who I think is hands down the best defensive player in the world and one of the best we've ever seen, they don't have any chance, especially until they try the rookie quarterback out.
Aaron Donald would still like a word.
Yeah, he would like a word, but TJ Watt would sack him. So,
but I think this is the best spot to bring Zach Wilson back, and the Jets do actually have a legit chance to win this game. Yeah. Their only problem is that they've literally only been good at football for 2 minutes this season. Like,
it was a big 2 minutes, though.
Yeah, the last 2 minutes of the Browns game are all that they've shown competency in. And it's weird for me because, like, the stats and the metrics tell a different story. And you have the defense for the Jets that had a lot of miscommunication issues in the Bengals game. But to me, when I watch them play, I'm seeing that the problem is the offense can't do anything, and then the offense can't struggle, and the defense does what they can, and they hold off a team in the first half, and then in the second half, the cracks start to show, they get tired, and then they start to break down. But I feel like this defense actually does have the whole team has some talent.
There's no question about that.
Yeah. To me, their biggest 2 problems are offensive line and quarterback. If they fix those, they're a contender in the league. Like Garrett Wilson.
There you go.
Now you're going to see you're going to see Elijah Moore get more touches. Like if you're playing fantasy, go out and try and trade for him, buy low now, because Zach Wilson's favorite target is Moore. And I think we're going to see him get more involved than we've seen so far. And like, this team's got good skill players. And
we haven't even brought up Breece Hall yet.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And that's him and Michael Carter are a good 1-2 punch in that backfield.
Yeah. The biggest problem is this team is now on their 4th left tackle this season.
Are they really?
Yeah, there's nothing you can do about that. Mekhi Becton goes out preseason, and then no big deal. They signed Dwayne Brown to replace him, and now he's hurt, and he's not coming off IR for another week. And then now left tackle George Fant, who played really well in the position last year for them, now he's on IR and he's out for at least 4 weeks. Like, what are you supposed to do? You can't do anything.
No, you can't.
What you're supposed to do, Ian, is continue to start Alex Highsmith against whoever's playing left tackle for the Jets this week.
Yeah,
pick up some more fantasy points.
Yeah, if you want to rush the quarterback, like the cure for what ails you is the Jets offensive line.
Yeah.
How did you end up a Jets fan?
I grew up in Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Syracuse alum.
Yep.
Oh shit.
So I think so Ian from Albany, before you guys have a New York love fest, or Metro Air, whatever you want to call it. I guess the question is, how did you become a San Jose Earthquakes fan?
Well, I grew up in Jersey, and then right before high school, my family moved to the Bay Area.
Okay, gotcha. So it is geographical fandom still.
Very much so. Yeah, it's just a weird geographical fandom, and I've kind of picked something up from everywhere, because obviously you have the Syracuse Orange. You got the football team from New Jersey, the soccer team from the Bay Area, and now the hockey team from Vegas.
Well, the Vegas Knights, not a bad time for you to move to Vegas and become a fan of them. You know, and as fans of another recent expansion franchise, we know the feeling, at least the regular season success here. Before we dive into some NBA, Thomas, you mentioned Bills Eagles. Is that your Super Bowl pick? I want to get some Super Bowl picks down on the record here.
Oh, that's so chalky. I can't do something like that. I can't do that.
I'll start it off then as
do it
you
for
guys.
The waste management tournament.
What's that?
Do it for the waste management tournament.
That's what I want.
Just for the ultimate.
Yeah, do it for the city.
The ultimate meeting of the fan bases there.
All right, Super Bowl predictions.
I'm gonna go from the AFC, as much as it pains me to do so. Baltimore Ravens.
Oh my God! Why did you take my team?
I was about to take them too.
Well, that's I guess host privilege there.
It's like you taking FC Dallas there. You taking the Ravens?
Hey, I respect Lamar already and what he's doing here in this contract year. That man is on a mission. Former league MVP, and they have looked. Even obviously dropping that crazy game to the Dolphins, they've just looked dominant on that offensive side of the ball, and they've had some injuries on defense. And I also don't think that the AFC North is as tough as people make it out to be, because they get to play Pittsburgh twice. Certainly before their quarterback gets back, any team with Jacoby Brissett at the helm is not going to be a contender. And again, we've talked about the Bengals kind of taking a step back this season, or, kind of in conjunction with that, maybe overplaying their hand last year. So I'm going to go Ravens over the Philadelphia Eagles in the Super Bowl.
Oh,
So I'll throw it to you, Ian.
Throw it to me?
Yeah.
Someone give me the Jags odds on going to the Super Bowl.
On DraftKings right now, I think Thomas is looking at a different book. I just have DK pulled up. 60-1.
Going to or winning?
What's winning?
That is winning. That is winning.
60-1 winning.
Going to the Super Bowl, the Jags are
25-1 for me.
30 on DK. So there's your value.
Interesting. I mean, the team I was looking at was the Ravens.
Yeah,
I feel the same way. Lamar is just absolutely incredible. I was having a conversation with one of my friends the other day, talking about was Vic the Curry of the NFL, and if that was the case, what does that make Lamar at this point?
Mm-hmm.
So I still like the Ravens. I think that loss versus Miami. What did they have, a 90? I mean, they had some sort of ridiculous win probability there, right?
Yeah, I mean, they were up 35-14, I believe.
Yeah.
38-14,
right? No, it was like I saw something the other day. It was like teams were 0-711 going into the fourth quarter, down 21, and now it's 1-711.
It was 35-14 to begin that fourth quarter,
Yeah.
42-38 in favor of Miami as the final score there.
Yeah, I like the Ravens, and man, I don't want to say the Eagles too.
Yeah, I mean,
like if we're going on record and this is being recorded,
yeah, it
you
is.
maybe I'll go down with you. I'll go.
Right.
We'll go down in flames together, my brother.
All right, as we
I'll
always
I'll
do.
go Ravens, Eagles, but I'll go Eagles. Over
Eagles winning. Okay, there you go. Thomas, how about you?
Why no love for Miami? They just beat the Ravens.
They did.
Could you imagine Mike McDaniel in his first year going and doing that? That would be not. I mean, this team looks ridiculous here.
The only undefeated team, right, in the AFC.
Yeah, the two non-believers are certainly being vindicated right now.
I hadn't heard that before. The two and on.
I was one of the. I was one of them. I was one of the
Okay.
guys who said, at the very least, maybe I didn't think he was going to be doing what he's doing right now. But I was the one saying it's ridiculous to imagine giving up on him after 2 seasons.
Absolutely.
When like he was supposed to be the savior of the franchise. Ryan Fitzpatrick even openly referred to his year playing for them as the tank for 2 a year. Like this guy was supposed to be the guy for you. And then his first season, first off, you're an Alabama quarterback, which means you are adjusting to the fact that your receivers are not going to be Alabama open in the NFL. And he also had to figure out how to walk on a new ankle and hip. Like there's a lot for him to figure out here. And
that's a good point.
This year, like he has looked the part. He's looked like a guy who has figured all that out. You've given him a bunch of weapons. We talked about it with Jalen Hurts being put in a position to succeed. They're putting him in a position to succeed here. I still don't think this team necessarily does it this year, but they've certainly been a surprising team, and they'll be a fun wild card team if they keep this up. The Bills are still going to win that division, but I don't think Baltimore can win the Super Bowl. I don't think I think that this defense is going to be exposed too much, and the offense outside of Rashawn Bateman, is Devin Duvernay really the guy? Is he really the number 2 receiver you want?
Hey, hopefully you're getting J.K. Dobbins back to full health as he continues to progress here, and maybe some Gus Edwards, because we know, I mean, this team, they don't want Lamar to primarily be doing it with his arm, right? It's a multi-headed backfield, including the quarterback, and they want to run all over your face.
But you're in the NFL. You're not going to win a Super Bowl running all over people's faces, and if you do, you have to have a dang good defense, because you're going to get stuck in a shootout eventually. And you need to be able to win that in the playoffs. And I don't think that they have the horses to get that job done. I'll go. I want to take Buffalo, but it's just way too chalky. And the fact that they were preseason favorites, and the fact that you just know, if I could get a price on Buffalo heartbreaking loss in the playoffs, yes, I would take that all day, because you know they're not going to do it. Like, you just know this team is going to have some sort of awful thing happen to them, and it's going to keep them from winning it. So I'm going to say Kansas City gets back there. You still got Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, and that's all you need there. The defense has been good. I don't care that they just lost to the Colts. Some games are fluky. They're still the 3rd team in the Massey Peabody rankings. What about Tampa? I'm going to go Tampa.
Yeah.
Mike Evans is going to be healthy. Chris Godwin's going to come back. Julio Jones is not going to come back, but you've still got Leonard Fournette, and then that defense wins championships, and that defense is fantastic.
Yeah.
They've still got Tom Brady here, and if he gets divorced, that means he's playing 5 more years and throwing the first 100 touchdown season. So I think we could see a Kansas City Tampa rematch.
Yeah, I don't hate that at all. Who wins it though?
KC.
All right, I like it. So
I like KC. I like KC a lot.
Same with Ravens.
Same with the Tua slander. It went too far with the Chiefs.
It did.
Yeah,
it went too far. Same thing with Tua.
I was one of them. Like all off season, I'm going, oh, no Tyreek Hill. They're gonna really feel that this offense isn't gonna be the same. And then I watched like 2 preseason possessions and went, oh no, never mind. They're still fine. Like I can still back this team. I don't know how much longer I can, because Travis Kelce eventually is going to not be there anymore. He's not going to be that guy. But you still got Mahomes, you still got Andy Reid, and I think they'll get enough out of the wide receivers, and they have that great offensive line. They'll be okay.
Okay, so in that scenario, do you see Isaiah Pacheco winning Super Bowl MVP? Because I do at that point.
Clyde Edwards-Helaire is still the better back for them.
Well, Jerick McKinnon's been the one, at least in week 3, who was getting the majority of the work for that team.
What was Edwards-Helaire's stat last weekend? 7 carries, 0
5
yards.
carries, 0 yards, I think.
I thought it
That's
was
just
7.
ridiculous. Honestly,
And he
I
was
think
like running back 13.
Yeah.
Yeah, 7 for 0 yards. And McKinnon, I mean, they were just piss poor on the ground last week, averaged 2.5 a carry on 23 totes as a team. Mahomes led him in rushing last week.
Yeah.
That
might be
interesting.
That might be the problem that sinks this team.
Pacheco being too talented.
If you can't tell, Thomas, I think he's got Isaiah Pacheco in every fantasy team that he drafted this year.
I have been in a redraft league, and this is the week.
This is the week Pacheco breaks out.
I'm gonna I let him go in the only in redraft. I'm gonna let him go. Dynasty keeper.
Yeah, you gotta hold on to him.
He will be held on to. But yes, I will be letting him go this week and accepting all the criticism that I'm gonna.
Sure, I mean, but you're a big proponent of the long shot Chiefs backs. You know, you're a disciple of Darwin Thompson. You know,
that's true. I was an acolyte in the Darwin Thompson cult for sure.
Yeah.
Also, I mean, I'm an old school, Philly Eagles fan, so I know Andy Reid. I know how to these guys.
True. Well, fellas, we're a little over an hour and a half here, and I know we said we would get into some NBA talk, but with that season still 3 weeks away, here's what I'm going to propose to you, fellas: that we have Thomas back again sometime in the next month or so. We talk MLS playoffs, right? Well, maybe we'll be in the middle of the playoffs there. Hopefully Austin still winning. Hopefully it's not the post-mortem on Austin's season when you're back, Thomas, but we'll talk some NBA then as well. How does that sound to you guys?
I'm fine with it on one condition.
All right.
I have to get this in right now. Fade the Clippers this season.
Oh, God. How are we supposed to not talk NBA when you take my champions and say fade them?
You have to fade them.
Woo! All right. I am excited.
That's what they call a tease in the business, I think. And Thomas, ever the professional. Once again, as we close out here, everybody, if you are still with us, we very much appreciate you sticking with the pod through an hour and a half. I think our longest pod to date yet here on episode 9, our Danny Husen episode, which by the way, I mentioned off the top that it was topical. Danny Husen and Andrew Tarbell, former San Jose.
And Nick Lima.
And Nick Lima.
Guys are Quakes. You guys are more Quakes than the Dynamo.
You can find Thomas on Twitter at TV at Work. He's the host of the Betting Pros podcast, also a host for Unabated Sports. And you can find his MLS betting podcast as well. Thomas, remind the people where they can find that, because it's going to jog my memory as well.
Head on over to @BecauseWeWin on Twitter. It's the Betting Weekly Studios, brought to you by Bet Rivers.
And there you have it. You can follow the pod at the North End Pod on YouTube or Twitter. If you're on YouTube, make sure you hit that subscribe button and the like button while you're here. It only takes 5 seconds, and the algorithm loves those thumbs up. You can follow me on Twitter at KawhiSenbergDFS. You can follow E, still nowhere. Still waiting for E to get on Twitter. One of these days.
Follow me on
Don't do it.
Check out my Tumblr.
And if you're listening to the podcast, Apple, Spotify, Spreaker, wherever you get your podcast, if you feel so inclined, you can leave a review. You can rate the podcast, hopefully 5 stars, especially this episode with the great Thomas Viola. Thomas, it was great having you, man. I'm very much looking forward to reuniting here in a couple weeks, talking some NBA, some more MLS playoffs. And hey, maybe we'll have, I think October 9th is decision day, not just for the MLS, but is it also when is the cutoff for the World Cup roster? Is that not till November?
No, I think that's in October.
Yeah, I think it might be right after, or like right in that same range as the MLS decision day. So we'll have a lot to talk about when Thomas returns. Again, appreciate everybody tuning in. This has been the North End Podcast. We'll talk to you guys soon. Enjoy your week. And until next time, vamos Austin FC. Goodbye.
3, 2,